Welcome back to the Balancing Act podcast. I'm Andy Tempe. On the Balancing Act, we talk to business leaders and industry experts to explore the balancing acts we play in our professional lives and learn about the events that put rocket boosters behind their career success. Today, we have Amber Ontiveros joining us. Amber is the president and founder of Ontiveros and Associates. They are equity and change management consultants from one of my favorite places in the world, the Portland, Oregon area. She's an author, mentor, and ally, transforming executives beyond imposter syndrome into confident leaders. I took that right from your website. Welcome to the show, Amber.
Thank you. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here.
Oh, no worries. Before we get started, I ask all my guests this question. Please tell our listeners your story.
Yeah. So just a little bit of personal information about me. I was raised on a farm in Arizona. I went to college here in Portland at Lewis and Clark and graduate school here. First person to go to college and graduate school. My career has really been in politics, communication, and public policy. When I moved here, I was fortunate to have met a Black senator, and we really hit it off. And I ended up working for her for a couple sessions. Then I became a lobbyist. And I was fortunate to have worked for the head of the transit agency here in Portland. And then eventually I went on to work for both the Bush and the Obama administration in Washington, D.C. at the U.S. Department of Transportation. And today I own my own firm. And it kind of makes sense in terms of my story based on what we do today.
Excellent. So I love my rocket booster question. What's the one event in your life that was the key accelerant for your career?
You know, if I had to say one thing that was the accelerant, it was working for the Honorable Margaret Carter. She was an African-American senator. She's still alive, but what she would have me do every night before she would vote on her bills is she would have me read and analyze every piece of legislation. And that taught me so much because I would, in a very short paragraph, I would have to write the pros and cons of the legislation. I would have to analyze the coalition. I would have to analyze the policy implications and make recommendations to her in 2 paragraphs on thousands of pieces of legislation a night. And it really helped me. And then when you hear a little bit about my other background, it really makes sense why that changed me.
Yeah, that ability to consolidate, to really get down to the kernel of what's happening, that is an important skill for all of us to hone. So parsimony
Yes.
about as good as anybody on the planet, I suppose.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Not many people know that word. I'm so happy that your eyes lit up when I said it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Well, I was just going to say, often it's that tiny little detail, the word to, shall, thou, those all matter.
Yep. Words matter for sure. So there's so much for us to talk about today, but let's start with your book, Heal the 4 Woundings. Before the show, we were chatting about brain science and unconscious bias. Please walk us through the 4 woundings and what's the main takeaway for readers?
Yeah. Well, the main takeaway is don't trust your mind. So the takeaway is don't trust your mind. So the book I wrote is called Heal the 4 Woundings as opposed to unconscious bias because I studied unconscious bias, the neuroscience behind it. And what I discovered is that it shocked me. What I discovered is that there is this self-serving bias that the neuroscience describes. And the way it works is like this. If good things happen to me, I attribute them to myself. If bad things happen to me, I attribute them to things outside of me. Now, this is clearly an evolutionary mechanism, because the way it works is, let's say you apply for a job, you don't get the job, you then blame it on other things. Well, it protects your self-esteem so you can overcome the challenge of not having the job so that you can get a job so that you can eat. Okay. Now, that's great. However, it doesn't presuppose that you could be wrong. And when you are wrong and make a mistake, that is the most important lesson. The other thing that I discovered is there's a part of your brain that filters out everything that you experience in your external world to what you believe about yourself. And it's called the reticular activation system. If you want to see it in action, drive to work and remember how you got there. The fact that you don't remember is the reticular activation system at work. Now, what's happening? What's the cause of, I realized what's the cause of oppression, the cause of discord, the cause of discrimination, the cause of imposter syndrome is these 4 woundings. And the 4 woundings are, I am not enough. I am not worthy. I must compete with you to win. And I have limited resources. And so the way it works is, a woman sees another woman, and this other person has an amazing skill that she does not believe she has within herself. And so because the brain, what the brain is doing automatically, very quickly, is processing this information, and it's applying a past trauma, which are these 4 woundings, to that scenario so quickly that you don't even know what's happening. So she's thinking, oh, there's something in you that's not in me. I'm not worthy. I'm comparing myself to you. And then she's thinking, I'm not enough, because in the past she had limited resources. So she's believing she must compete with her to win and to survive. It's happening so quickly. So the book is called Healing, because in order for all of us to step into who we truly are, which is kind, loving, compassionate beings, we have to heal those wounds that are creating imposter syndrome, that are resulting in discord between myself and our colleagues, and even with our loved ones. So now I teach these tools. I teach mindfulness and meditation to my clients, because the way that you deal with these traumas is through healing. And meditation has shown to increase creativity. It creates emotional resilience. It's the number one thing that I have found that helps with emotional intelligence.
Thank you so much, Amber. I'm sure you could have given us an hour on the book, and it was very short, very sharp description, but highly effective. Thank you so much for that. Now let's talk about your firm, Ontiveros and Associates. What's the 2-minute elevator pitch, and what differentiates you from other change management consultants?
Sure. So I can honestly say I'm one of the few people in the country that has both written federal civil rights law and implemented it. And I know that is the reason why, when I worked in DC, why I was able to create it and then conduct investigations of agencies and write federal policy, is because at the local level, when I worked for the transit agency, I actually helped change operational systems within the agency. And then the other thing that I did was then I wrote policy for how you actually create these things. And I created an entire department, a transit equity department, in 2002. And so that is what makes me very different. I have a good grasp of implementation and policy, and not all policy should be created. It has to be implementable, or it's, that's who I am.
Right. Well, thank you for that. Amber, I like to run thought experiments on the show. And so before we head to a quick commercial break, I believe strongly that businesses and institutions should have a plan for managing change. But in my experience, many of them don't have a plan, and they end up paying a very high price for not having a change management in place. Let's suppose you have a chief executive officer sitting in front of you right now who is skeptical about the value of change management practices. How do you help them see the benefits of being proactive as it relates to change?
Yeah. If there was someone sitting down in front of me right now and they were a client, I would say, I'm literally working on this very issue right now with another client. And I would say to you what I have said to them. You can't change unless you know where you want to go. And you can't do that unless you have a clear vision with a clear set of goals, timelines, and identification of strategies and funding for the change. What I oftentimes see, and I'm seeing this over here right now, is they want to change, but they haven't thought through how to change and the plan for the change. If you don't develop a plan for the change, by the time you figure out you need the plan, there will have been significant costs associated with not having planned.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is this undertone of leadership magical thinking, that we want to go there. I want to do that, but I'm just going to assume that everybody's going to come along with me, and the resources to do this and the plan is going to magically appear out of thin air. All I should have to do is wave my arm and say, let's go there. And then what happens is everybody else is sitting around scratching their head going,
Yes.
what about me? What about all these other things you asked me to focus on?
Yes.
Yeah.
And if they were really my client, what I would help advise them on is how to create the way change is done that is effective is you have a coalition that helps push the change, in which case, because of my political background, I'm really good at understanding who are the political levers within the circumference of change that should be part of the levers of change. So that would be the other recommendation.
Yeah, and if you're one of those, and these people are out there, I know some of them personally that do not believe that businesses have political structures within them. You are sadly mistaken. I'm sorry. All companies have these political structures that have built up within their cultures over time. So please listen to Amber.
Yes, yes. Again, coming back to a realistic strategy.
Yes. So we're going to take a really short commercial break. We'll be right back. Has trust broken down in your organization? Learn how smooth workflows enable accountability and unlock trust to create long-term business success. Learn more in my new book, The Balanced Business, available today at Amazon.com and wherever books are sold. And we are back with Amber Ontiveros talking about DEI, coaching, and change. Let's shift gears a little bit, Amber. Let's talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. This term has unfortunately become politically charged, and a lot of folks are super skeptical about it. Let's continue our thought experiments. Suppose you have a member of the C-suite of a large organization sitting in front of you right now who cringes and rolls their eyes when they hear these words. They think engaging with DEI is a massive waste of time and energy. What's your advice to help this individual see the benefits of inclusion in their business or institution?
Well, for those of you CEOs that are rolling your eyes and don't see the benefit, I understand. And in some ways, I agree with you, but I would say don't lose hope. And I would say that because there are companies like ours out there. You know, we do top notch, constitutionally defensible programs. And, you know, all of these programs need to have real performance measures. They need to be real programs, just like anything else. But the thing that I think is important is we need to start looking at DEI differently, and we need to focus on uniting rather than dividing.
Yes.
And so, thus, my book. My goal is to create healing between the races. I do not believe, now that I've studied the science and I have applied the science to myself, I do not believe that racism is about race at all. It is about this one part of our brain. It's really about self-esteem. So that's why I believe DEI needs to change how we talk about it, and it needs to focus on healing. And it not just for me, but for you, because you, all of us, have been traumatized around the DEI conversation now. I was traumatized to the point that I wrote my book. You've been traumatized now because we've had the conversation. So that's why I've incorporated mindfulness and meditation in my work. And here is an approach difference that I want your listeners to think about. In my book, I describe what I believe could be the cure for oppression. There is a tribe in Africa, and this is what they do when someone acts badly. They put the individual in the middle of the tribe, and they recount every bad deed, every good deed, every loving word, every kind action that person did in the life of the tribe. What they do is they remind that person back to the better part of themselves. So if you made a mistake at work, if you heard, awesome, we figured it out, we made that mistake, yes. And then we heard, you are so brilliant, you are so kind, you are so lovable. Imagine the world that we would live in. We would literally change that reticular activation system to allow all of us to experience what we want to, which is happiness and kindness.
Amber, I'm absolutely moved by your words here and this perspective. The mindset that we just need to erase and move on. Forget that. Forget about the past, really, and just assume that everybody's equal and move on without doing that work both within ourselves and within our society is fascinating. And this framework of this in Africa, where you put the individual in the middle, and it's about the positive and not the finger pointing and the negative. I think we can all learn a lot from that.
Well, and if we're serious about growth mindset, we should celebrate every single mistake we have ever made, because it has made us the rock star that we are.
Yes. Thank you. So, Amber, on your LinkedIn page, your tagline is Ally, transforming executives beyond imposter syndrome into confident leaders. And I've written quite a bit lately about imposter syndrome. How do you help high performers quiet the voices in their heads that are constantly telling them that they're not good enough and that they are frauds?
Well, first of all, don't believe the voice in your head. If you feel like a fraud, it's because you are literally trying to change and you're bumping up against the trauma that's in your mind. So, here's one of the things that I suggest. Focus on your breath when this happens. Breathe in and out. Ask yourself a question about the negative thinking. What are the beliefs that you have about yourself? Why do you feel this way? There's some kind of negative thinking that you have. And the way that you change it is you change that story to imagine the opposite. This is what top performing athletes do, is they create these visualization techniques and they visualize it, their success. And you do that, you see yourself succeeding at what you're trying to do. And then you do that for 7 days, and your brain doesn't know the difference between an imaginary and a real scenario. So here's why visualization is important and why all of the tools that I'm suggesting, they seem kind of woo-woo, but they really work because this is about neuroplasticity. Understand, this is about healing. Healing requires changing the neural pathways. It requires changing. That's why meditation, mindfulness, mindful listening, visualization works, because your brain doesn't know the difference. The science shows the brain doesn't know the difference between an imaginary and a real experience. So it thinks it's actually happening. So it's changing the neural pathways to allow you to believe it actually occurred. That changes your confidence.
Oh, thank you, Amber. I love all this brain science that we're talking about today and how our brains can totally fool us. I particularly enjoyed a 2-part series on PBS's show Nova, which aired back in 2023, called The Brain, and it was a two-parter, and it's a wonderful watch if for members of the audience, if you want to go out and get a little layman's brain science. It's really good. Amber, we're going to close out the show with a couple of lightning round questions. First lightning round question: I give you access to a time machine. You can send a message to an earlier version of yourself. What's the short message, and what previous version do you send it to?
I would say I would send my book to myself 20 some years ago. And that's because I now know that happiness is the most important thing in your life. And if you can bottle it, do it. And that's what I've done. And I would send it to myself when I was in my 20s, because in the book, I talk about some of my trauma and why was I so unhappy. I was so unhappy because I had been raped when I was young, and I've healed all of those woundings. They no longer hold me back. And so in my 20s, I was just becoming a new person, a new, woman. And I wish I would have known that.
Thank you so much for sharing. We're all works in progress. Amber, what are you focused on right now in your personal journey of growth?
I'm learning to be an authentic and vulnerable thought leader. So I'm here to encourage other thought leaders who want to be authentic to join me in this conversation. And I know what I'm saying requires, vigor, but I believe we can change this conversation around DEI because it's not about race.
That is awesome. Great place to end the show. What's next for you, and where can people learn more?
So I'm doing other podcasts and doing some executive coaching with a group of CEOs. Stay tuned for my website for more information about that. Our website for information about Heal the Four Woundings is healthefourwoundings.com.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Amber.
Thank you.
All right. Well, my name is Andy Tempty. This is the Balancing Act podcast. You can find us on all the major streaming services. Please like, subscribe, rate, and most importantly, share this particular episode where we talked about the brain and DEI and change. We just had a really rich conversation. Share this with your friends, your colleagues, and your neighbors. The show was produced by Nick Tempty, and we'll see you next time on the Balancing Act.